So hello again and welcome to part 2 of my series on filters in landscape photography. This week I'm going to be covering the solid neutral density filters. Last week we did circular polarizing filters. So what are solid neutral density filters? So last time we talked about the different types. So there's the screw-in type that screw directly into the end of the lens. I have the slot type which are made up of these 100mm glass filters, and as we talked about then, adapters screw into the end of your lens, which hold the holder which the filters screw into, but we'll cover that in more detail later. They come in various densities. And these are normally referred to as stops. So how many stops of light are they? So a 3-stop, and if I hold up a 6-stop, you can probably see that that is a bit darker, and then a 10-stop is darker still. These are made of glass. You can get resin type ones. The glass ones are obviously a bit more fragile, but they're harder and scratch less. I guess the solid and the neutral bit of it. So what it refers to is the fact that it's a solid amount of light reduction across this way and across this way. So all the way across the filter, it's a solid light reduction. Neutral is because it shouldn't provide a color cast to your images, and that will depend on the manufacturers that you buy. These are from a company called, I think it's Hader, or it could be Hader. There'll be a link in the notes. What I should say is, as I said, these are 100mm. You can get, these will fit a full frame camera, or a crop sensor camera, possibly if you have a micro four thirds, then you can get away with a 67mm set. These will be cheaper, but you can also, if you've got an ultra wide angle lens on a full frame sensor, you probably need 150mm, and they start to get very expensive. These I think probably bought on their own are around the £100. So as I said, these come in what's called stops, and I talked about stops of light last time, but just to recap, a stop of light is a relative measure of how much light it is being essentially filtered by putting this in front of your lens. And the way it works is, so this is a 3-stop filter. If I put this in front of my lens, for every stop you halve the amount of light reaching your sensor. So if it's 3 stops, it's one half, then halved again, and then halved again. And that means to get the same amount of exposure in your image, if you put one of these in front of your camera lens, say that you've got a 200th of a second exposure without, if you put this in front of your lens, then you need to double your exposure and double again, double again. So what's that? That's 1/25th of a second exposure. So thinking about the fact that it lengthens your exposure, then you probably can guess what you use them for in landscape photography. I've got a couple of examples here. So my first example is this is a communications tower. Not hugely interesting, but the day I took this, there was a lot of low cloud, and it was moving quite quickly. So I put I think a 10-stop filter on there, and the 10 stops, it gave me an exposure of, I think it was 47 seconds. So in 47 seconds, what you can see what it's done to the clouds, it's actually given me some nice lead-in lines for this image. So the next image I've got is it's a old lighthouse. It's down in Dovercourt in Essex, and it wasn't a particularly rough sea. Well, it was a very calm sea, and this was at sunset. And actually, I went down there to capture lighthouse with sunset in the background that wasn't happening due to the cloud. So what I did was I put a 6-stop filter on here, Six-stop filter has given me an exposure time of about 30 seconds. 30 seconds has just smoothed out that sea, and it's really simplified my image. Print that in black and white, and job's a good one. You suddenly, you've captured something that is quite striking. The other obvious thing you can do is on waterfalls and rivers. You can slow the water down to give it that sort of, smeared effect. Personally, I don't really like doing that, so I don't have a picture to show you there, but it's the same idea. You're taking a photo, you're artificially extending your shutter speed, and you're getting that effect in the water. So for something different, to show you how to use them, I thought we'd do that in the field, so let's play tape. So at this point, this is where we discover that actually the sound recording didn't record on the day. So I'm going to just talk over this. So this is the Dancing Ledge in Dorset. Just showing you here setting up. You've seen the drone footage, and what we're looking for is some nice leading lines, which we're showing you here, leading into this view here. So this is where we'll set up. It's flat light today, as you can see, so what we will do is we'll put some filters on, and we'll play around with the time settings, and we'll try and smooth out that water and just see what the effect is like. So we've set up the shot now, and I'm just getting my filters out of my bag. So we've got the kit here, and the first thing that I'm going to do is attach to the ring, the adapter ring, to the front of the camera. Screw that on, and if I get the right one, that's good. So we get that screwed on, and what I am also going to do is fit a polarizing filter, and that piece is needed regardless of whether we're actually going to put a polarizing filter in it or not. And then the last thing we'll do is actually screw in the polarizing filter. That's not really going to have any effect today because it's overcast, but I'm just sort of showing you here that this fits into the holder and doesn't impede us going and putting the slot type filters on the front of that. So we'll take a test shot which will give us our exposure length, and that will allow us to then calculate, when we put the 10-stop filter on, what exposure length we need at that point. So we get the filter holder, and that goes on to the front of the camera, and the filter itself, which I normally slide in and then fit the holder to the rest of the camera. Now what we need to make sure we do though is we put the camera in manual mode, so that it doesn't readjust the focus when we put that on. To calculate the correct exposure, you can use an app. The Lee Filters app on the iPhone and Android is really good, and how it works is you've got the 3 different types of filters at the top: 6-stop, 10-stop, 15-stop, 2 wheels. You move the wheel on the left to the correct exposure without the stopper. You set the correct stopper at the top, as you can see. I've got a 10-stop in this case, and so I change that to 10, and I move my correct exposure was a 20th or a 25th of a second. So we move that wheel round, and as you see, it will move the right hand wheel round and give us our correct exposure. So 25th of a second is 40 seconds in this instance. So as I've shown you before, you fit the filter. I do it with it in the holder to the front of your camera, so the other 2 piece of the holder. fit that. It can be quite tricky, but have that fitted, and then you set your camera to the correct exposure. Here you'd have to set it to bulb mode, and then I'd still check the histogram and maybe adjust my exposure if I thought the histogram looked a bit off, and then take my exposure. I turn the noise reduction setting on, yeah, make sure I've set a 2-second timer, and take the image. So if you've liked this video, please give me a like, give me a comment below. There'll be another one covering the graduated ND filters, and hope to see you on that, and please subscribe.